FEMA is well known to Oklahomans. We just had 560,000 homes hit with a severe weather event, and then last winter, I was on the ground in McCurtain County where we had a tremendous impact of a tornado. In the chart behind me, over the last decade, FEMA has increased disaster-related spending in a manner that is quite significant. It's like year over year from 2013, like a 9% increase, way above most other agencies. And so, for someone that is very concerned with our runaway deficits and the fact that we'll overspend by $1.5 trillion this year, which was the size of our gross national debt in 1983, just 40 years ago. We'll overspend in 1 year what it took us 200 years to get to just 40 years ago in 1983. Trying to make our dollars go farther. The larger graphic, it may be hard for you to see this, maybe I may be blocking your line of sight, but this is something you know well. It's the normal budget, and then we have to come in and backfill to the blue. That's the supplemental. But over here in the smaller graphic, what you'll see is that's kind of the historic look of FEMA, this very small chart. And so where these arrows point at the top here, we can't, the numbers are so high we can't get above for a good visual. And so it really showcases that in the last decade plus, FEMA's budget has really been tremendous. And that makes me want to transition to something that someone might go to the thought of what President Biden said in 2023, where he said that extreme weather caused by climate change leads to stronger, more frequent storms, more intense droughts, longer wildfire seasons. You'd said a minute ago, I see climate change as one of our most significant threats. So I think it's important for us to look at the science. I'm going to disagree with you, but I don't want to disagree based upon opinion. Let's look at the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, because I want to push back on the thought that climate change is causing this. And because then it gets to the point of maybe we need to look at efficiency to a greater level. And so if you look at the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, what you'll actually find is, if you do look at what the UN, not often seen as very conservative, the United Nations, I'm quoting from them, their Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in regard to hurricanes came to a conclusion. It states there's no consensus on the role of human activity on changes of Atlantic hurricane activity. The IPCC also determined since 1900 there's been no trend in the amount of landfall events in the U.S. Tornadoes. Scientists have incredibly low confidence in understanding their capability to attribute climate change to serving convective storms, thunderstorms, which produce tornadoes. That's National Academy of Science. Floods. The IPCC, United Nations Committee tasked with looking at climate change, estimates the total amount of flooding around the world. No clear picture on whether flooding is getting more or less frequent, much less if human activity is involved. Regarding inland flooding, they say there is a, quote, lack of evidence and low confidence regarding the sign of a trend in magnitude or frequency of floods on a global scale. Extreme temperatures, wildfires. I want to go back to what the president was referencing. Just a few years ago, climate alarmists claimed that continuing, quote, business as usual, presumably meaning humans continuing to engage in activities that emit greenhouse gases, would warm the world 4 to 5 degrees Celsius. They are now admitting that new reports support the prediction that the world's temperature may rise only half as much, which would mean 2 or 3 degrees over the next century. And in regard to human influence, a large temperature increase from about 1 degree Fahrenheit occurred from 1880 to 1940, long before human influence had that type of impact, before mechanization to a great level. Some consider this temperature increase to be a recovery from the Little Ice Age, spanning from 1600 to 1850, and the UN panel that I keep referencing admitted the plausibility of this, and if true, this indicates there's been no net warming at all in the past century due to greenhouse gases. So we have to look at the science and the international community who's saying there's this constant messaging and theme. The United Nations is saying it's not there. There's no consensus with the role of climate change in this regard. And so I just respectfully challenged, and I know you serve this president, I respectfully challenge with limited funds, with a budget request that wants $3.9 billion more for climate resiliency programs, for us to look at ways to be much more efficient with our taxpayer monies. And I've got one, if you'll just give indulgence, I've got one quick question for you. In your opinion, Does the removal of AM radio in some cars, it's kind of been a topic of discussion in recent time frame, weaken your ability through the National Public Warning System to reach Americans in times of crisis?
It's a very good question, Congressman, and AM radio is one of the most dependable ways that we can reach individuals across this country to get warnings out there. And I do believe that if we remove AM radio from our vehicles, we're just taking away a very stable and reliable source for us to get that information out there. AM radio is integrated into our emergency alert and warning system, and I think it would have a significant impact.
Thank you for your time. I yield back.